Okay, so for this first problem, what they want us to do is they want us to do some synthetic division. So here's how you go about doing synthetic division. We're going to put -5 in the box because they gave us a +5. And then we're going to write the first number in front of each of these that we have. So that would be 1, 18, 80, 65, and -50. And then all we're going to do is you always carry the first number down, then multiply, and then add as we go along. So that's 13. That I don't do well at the top of my head. -65. Which this would be then 15. Then times again, which I think is -75. Which then that would be -10. And then that would be +50, which gives us a remainder of 0. Then if we wrote this, this would be x cubed, because it's always one less than the exponent that you have, plus 13x squared, plus 15x, minus 10. And which one does that match? Well, it matches A. Let's try the next one. So we need the polynomial in standard form with these zeros that matches this thing. So one thing you could do is you could just graph all 4 choices and see which one crosses at these 3 points with your graphing calculator. Now, I think that way is not a bad way, but I think the slightly faster way would be to write these things in factored form, which would be x plus 1, because it's always the opposite, x minus 3, and x minus 4, and then multiply all this stuff out. So when you multiply the first one, what you are going to end up getting is you're going to get x squared minus 3x plus 1x minus 3. And this would give you, if you simplified it, x squared minus 2x minus 3. And now we're going to distribute this with x minus 4, so I'm going to need some more room, so let's go down here. And then again, you're going to multiply this out, so that's going to give you x to the third minus 4x squared, then these two, so that's -2x squared plus 8x, and we're going to have to go to these two, and that would be -3x plus 12. Now we're going to combine like terms, so these are alike, and these are alike, which is going to finally leave me with x cubed minus 6x squared plus 5x plus 12, which, if you go through, should be B. Let's try the next one. So this one we have to match with graph it is here. And again, you could graph all these and see which one works out, but a slightly faster way is just understanding what we have. So we have zeros at -1. So let's write these down. We have zeros at -1, 0, 1, and 2. So this could be written as x plus 1. This could be written as x plus 0, or the easier way is just writing this as x for that one. For this one, you could write it as x minus 1, and this you could write as x minus 2, and this one would be squared, because if you look at this, this has a bounce to it. It hits the axis and it bounces back down. So the one that matches, if we kind of look through everything, looks to be this one, C, right here. So as you kind of go through, that's the one that matches. I could have put the X. I guess this is where they wanted to keep the X because it was in order, but that's the one it matches, and that's why. Let's try the next one. So if they give me something in standard form, what I would probably do with this is graph it. So let's just figure out which one this is going to be when we graph it. So that would be -x to the third minus 3x plus, or whoops, 3x squared plus 4x. And then I did graph. And we can see that which one does it look like it matches. It looks like it matches E. The other way that you could see which one it matched besides graphing it on your calculator and seeing, is by putting this in factor form, which is actually not too bad to do. So let's do that really quick, just to see this way. But I wouldn't do this way on the test. I'd choose the faster way. But first, you could take out an x, specifically a negative x, and that would leave x squared plus 3x minus 4 inside of here because I took out a negative x. And then you could just factor this, and this would factor to x plus 4 and x minus 1 and a negative x out in front. And then you could see that if you played the negative game, like we have a negative, a negative, a negative, negative, so it starts up. So that's why this one started up. And then it should bounce at all those points, and if you could zoom in really close, you can see it hits the point -4, +1, and 0. So that's why it matches that one. But again, the easier way is graph it on your calculator, see which one it matches. Let's try the next one. This one, again, I'd probably graph on my graphing calculator, but you can actually just tell the answer by looking at the zeros. Because they said, look, you have these zeros, and what's the graph look like? So the zeros would obviously be at 0, if I could write up there, at 0, 3, and 2. So it's got to be D. But let's see the graph and just double check. So when I plug this in, that'd be x times x minus 3 times x plus 2. And if I hit graph, we can see that that looks to be about right. Oh, I put +2 and I said -2. I was wondering why that was off. Okay, graph again. There we go. Now that looks a little bit better. So we can see that, yep, that looks about right. They didn't bold this axis very well, but that's it. Okay, let's try the next one. So it asks, what's the IQR of the box plot? Well, the IQR is the interquartile range, or just how far Q1 through Q3 is, which is just this right here. So the IQR is from 3 to 6, or 3. So the IQR is 3 in this case. Let's try the next one. Okay, so we're supposed to use the discriminant to see how many solutions this has, but that's pretty easy to decide without. So first, let's get this into a form that we can use. And you see how things are on different sides? We can't have that. So we're going to actually get everything to one side. So to do that, we're going to subtract 12k. We're going to add 4, subtract 12k, and add 4. And that's going to give us 9k squared minus 12k plus 4. And then we're going to graph this thing. So I'm going to use my graphing calculator again. You don't need to use k's. X's work at the same. So we'll just plug that in. And then we'll hit graph. And as you can see, it looks like it hits once and goes off. We can double check that if we're unsure. So how you would double check that is you would just look at the underneath of the square root of the quadratic formula, which is b squared minus 4ac. So in this case, that would be 144 minus 9 times, well, I guess 4 times 9 times 4, and if you do that, you get 144 minus 144, which is 0, so this does only cross once, or has one real solution. Let's try the next one. So for this one, it says decide if this, is a factor of this. And how you decide something is a factor is if it divides it. So we're going to put -4 in here and use synthetic division and see if this divides this thing nicely. If it does, then we are successful. If it doesn't, then it's not. So that'd be 8, -32, that'd be 1, that'd be -4, that would be -8, that would be, oh, whoops, yeah, that was +1. Okay, I did that right. That would be positive 32, that'd be 33, and that would be negative 132, and I don't know what that is, but it doesn't look to be a factor. So, no, this thing is not a factor, because when we plug this in, it doesn't work out. So, make sure when you're doing the synthetic division, if you get a remainder or no remainder, then it's not a factor, but if you get a remainder, it's not. Try the next one. So we have to solve this compound inequality. So that's not very hard to do. So all you have to do to solve the compound inequality is you don't look at the outside things. These are just your answers. You just look at your inside and try to solve. So the first thing we're going to do is add 4. And when you add 4, you have to add 4 to everything. It's going to give me negative 15, 3x, and then 9. And then we're going to divide everything through by 3, which is going to give me x is less than 3, and negative 5, which would be B. Let's try the next one. Okay, so for this problem, the very first thing you should do is look how many answers it should have, which this little 3 is the hint. So it should have 3 answers. So right off the bat, A is not correct because it doesn't have 3 answers. That's why all the rest of these have 3 answers. Now let's go through and solve it to make sure which one's the correct one. And the first thing we're going to do to solve it is we're just going to solve it like normal. So we're going to add 64 to both sides. And then we're going to get 64, and then we're going to cube root that. And when you cube root that, you're going to get that is equal to 4. Well, now that is one of our answers. So what we're going to have to do is, after we get one of our answers, is we're going to have to use synthetic division to find the other ones. You might go, why are you putting in 2 zeros here? Well, I'm putting a 0 in for each x that we're missing, and we're missing an x squared and an x, so I need an x for that. And then we'll go through and do the synthetic division. So this should be easy enough. And that cancels out. So we're really left with our other thing being x squared plus 4x plus 16. And then you might go, well, how would I solve this? Well, the easiest way to solve this would be the quadratic formula. So we would do negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And when we plug that in, we'd have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 4 times 1 times 16 all over again 2. Now this could be reduced to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 48, or negative 48, I think, over 2. I'm going to double check that to make sure I was right, but that would be 16 minus 4 times 16. Yep, negative 48. Now, if you want to do this, you know that negative 4 is divisible by 2, so that would be negative 2 plus or minus. And then we would have this square root that we would have to deal some stuff with. So let's do that in 2 parts. So we divided this side right here, but we haven't divided this side, so we have to do that now. The square root of negative 48 can be broken down to be the square root of negative 16 and the square root of 3. So the square root of negative 16 would be 4i, and the square root of 3 is just the square root of 3. So this would be negative 2 plus or minus the 4i square root 3 over 2. And we can do the square root of 2, or divide 4 by 2, which would be negative 2 plus or minus 2i square root 3. So this, after that long explanation, would be our final answer, which would be D. I would look for things that have radicals, because a lot of times they will not all reduce out. let's try the next. Now this one we could solve by hand, but if we have our graphing calculator, it's a lot easier to solve on our graphing calculator. So for my grapher, I first would turn this into a matrix just to work with this. My matrix would look something like this. And then it would be times by x, y, z, and then it would equal 1, 4, 11. And then if you remember, if we call this matrix A and this matrix B, what we really want to do is we want to take the inverse of both sides. So our final answer should be A inverse B. So let's get that all in the calculator. So we're going to go to second matrix, and we're going to go to edit, and we're going to put in a 3 by 3 for A, which is 1, 2, 5, negative 3, 3, 7, negative 8, 5, and 12. And then we'll hit second matrix again, and now go to B, and we'll go a 3 by 1, I'll have 1, 4, 11, and then we're going to quit. Then I would like to take matrix A and inverse it, and then take matrix B and times it, and we will see that our answers would be negative 1, negative 9, and 4. So the answers to this would be x equals negative 1, y equals negative 9 and 4. Is that what I got? Yeah. Okay, in a second I'm going to solve this thing by hand, but the biggest thing is it is a lot easier to do this on your graphing calculator than to do this by hand, which will take a little bit. So this is the method I would recommend and I would do for the test instead of solving this by hand. Okay, so we did this with the graphing calculator, which is really the way you should do it, because if you're not doing it with the graphing calculator, this is really tough. But it's still doable, so we're going to try a second time, because I messed up the first time, but I think I figured out where I went wrong. When you're solving this, the first thing I would do is kind of number your equations so you know which one's which. So we got 1, 2, and 3. And then you want to eliminate a variable. Now there's no nice variables to eliminate, so we're going to choose x because that seems the nicest. And we're going to use, you got to eliminate it out of all 3, which means we have to use these 2, and then after using these 2, use those 2, because that will get rid of all 3. So we'll do equation 1. We're going to times it by 3 and add it to equation 2 because that should cancel out the x's there. Then we're also going to take equation 1 and times it by 8 and add it to equation 3, and that should all work out nice. So the first one would be 3x plus 6y plus 15z equals, well, that'd be 3. And we'd add that to this one, and I'm going to try to do that properly this time, because adding sometimes is difficult. Cancel 9y plus 22z equals 7. And now we're going to use equation 8, and using equation 8 we would get 8x plus 16y plus 40z equals 8, and then we will add it to our negative 8x plus 5y plus 12z equals 11, and that will cancel. This would be 21y plus 52z equals 19. And now we're going to combine these two things. So when I combine these two things, I'll have 9y plus 22z equals 7, and then 21y plus 52 equals 19. And then we have to use elimination again, so we're going to have to times this one by negative 21. We're going to have to times this one by 9. We add them together. So this is not necessarily fun. That'd be negative 189y minus, we're going to hope this works out, I hope I wrote that down correctly. Yep, good. So really, like, this is a pain in the butt. If you have to do it this way, it's almost better to just try your best. Hopefully you don't make a mistake. It's pretty easy to make a mistake though, and that's why I am double checking everything and like triple checking everything, because every step makes me a little nervous. And I did nope, I did mess up. Maybe I did. That was 19. There we go. I was like, that's not going to be large enough. And hopefully we get a positive number. Cross our fingers and our toes. And we get z equals 4. And if you remember from our graphing calculator just a minute ago, if I turn this on, hey, z was 4, so we did that right. Success. And now you have to go through the process of plugging this back in. And you do have to plug it into one of these two equations with two variables. This one seems to be the smallest, so we'll say 9y plus 22, or 88, because 4 times 22 would be 88 equals 7, minus 88 minus 88. We'd have 9y equals negative 81, and hey, y equals negative 9. And then you would take these two things and plug them into one of your top equations. So probably this one with the x, so that would be like I'd plug my negative 9 in there, and I'd plug my 4 in there. And so this would give you x minus 18 plus 20 equals 1, or x plus 2 equals 1, or x equals negative 1. And if we go back through and we check, we got that same answer. So again, you can see like this took me 5 minutes to do by hand, and it took me maybe 20 seconds on the graphing calculator. So you do not want to spend this whole time doing this by hand when you can do it on the grapher. Let's try the last problem. Now, doing a really tough problem like this last one, this is a nice little break. So you can see that this slope is going down, so it has to be a negative slope, so that one's gone. And this one's gone. So we just got rid of those two, so now we're left with these. Since it goes to the right 3, it would be a negative 3, so we would just be left with B, and obviously up 4. So B is your correct answer. So you could always check these on your grapher if you wanted to graph them, but I just think it's easier to use transformations. So if you need any help, just let me know. This is the last day of the review, so all of these problems, you've gone through everything that could possibly be on the final. Make sure you've gone back through and you've checked and you've triple checked that you know how to do everything, because you don't want to get to a problem on the test and go, I have no clue. And the video should help with all of that. Just let me know if you need any help.